Everybody, welcome. I'm really excited about today's webinar because I was just like tickled pink as I started discovering all these free resources that were available. And I kept remembering that there's a lot of people out there who've told me, Keith, I don't have any money. I need help. And so hopefully this will be a tremendous help for you. So without further ado, let's talk about creative and free labbing with Sandboxes and VLabs. If you need to reach out to me, after we're done here, here's my contact information. I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have, if I have the answer. So let's go ahead and start talking about the challenge. Why did I decide to do this? Why did I decide to make this webinar? And what are some of the common problems or questions I get from INE clients that I think what I'm about to teach you will help? Well, here's some common things that I hear. Number one, hear this a lot. I'm studying for a particular exam, like a Cisco or Juniper exam. I know I'm supposed to be practicing the things I'm learning in the videos and books, but I don't have access to a lab and I don't have any money to buy equipment or rent time on a lab. What do? This will help you with that. Number two, I have a technical problem. Maybe I'm not studying for a certification exam, but I've got a technical issue and I want to see if there's a JunoS or an iOS command that exists that will help me solve my problem, and I just need to log on to a box or two and use the question mark and see what commands are available. And I don't have any box to do that. Help me with that, okay? Or there's a technology like automation or routing protocols or something that I'd like to play around with. Maybe I read about this in networkingworld.com or something, and I want to test it out myself and just see, can Cisco and Juniper devices do this technology? What commands do they have available? I like to practice it, but I don't have any lab equipment. How do I do that? There's that. And then probably the thing I hear the most often from very, very frustrated students, my spouse is driving me crazy. Where can I find a free lab to access so I can just escape for a while? All right, maybe I haven't actually heard that one, but that might resonate with one or two of you guys who are watching right now, or ladies as well. All right, so let's talk about VLabs and Cisco Sandboxes. And I picked these two, well, for two main reasons. Number one, pretty much everybody knows that Cisco is the preeminent leader when it comes to networking equipment out there. Okay, if you look at any chart about market share, they have the predominant market share in almost everything. And then Juniper is pretty close. Actually, some charts I looked at recently said that actually, I don't know if I pronounced this correctly, Huawei was actually right behind Cisco, but unfortunately, I couldn't find any free sandboxes that Huawei has. So I'm not sure how you would practice their stuff for free if it's possible. But Juniper is also very well known, and they do have free sandboxes called VLabs. So what are the benefits of this stuff? Number one, it's free. You don't have to pay a red cent, right? All you got to pay is your monthly ISP cost to give you internet access to your home or wherever you are. That's it. As long as you got a computer and internet access, you can access these things. They don't charge you anything. Number two, it's reservable. So we'll see here that at least as far as Cisco's sandboxes are concerned, their sandboxes fall into sort of two general categories. There are some sandboxes that they say are basically open access all the time. You don't have to reserve them, but they're shared environments, which means that when you're in that sandbox working on whatever equipment that sandbox provides you, there might be other people in there with you at the same time who might undo your configuration or configure something that messes up what you're doing, okay? So I'm sure there's some value to that, but I personally would prefer to have my own sandbox that nobody else can get into. And those are the reservable ones. And you can reserve them for like a minimum of 4 or 5 hours, sometimes all the way up into several days, and it's all yours. So I think that's really cool. What do they require? Very, very little. A web browser, right? You can do this in Chrome, you can do this in Safari, doesn't really matter what your web browser is. Now the Cisco sandboxes, not all of them, but many of them require some sort of a VPN client that after you reserve your time on the sandbox, you'll have to VPN into it. Now, they recommend that you use their VPN client, the Cisco AnyConnect Secure Mobility Client, and that is free, okay? Actually, from the Sandbox environment, they give you a link where you can download that either for Windows operating systems or Mac operating systems. But Some people don't want to use that for whatever reason. Or another situation is I found one time when I was preparing a course, I was using Ubuntu as my client, and I couldn't easily find a version of Cisco's AnyConnect for Ubuntu. It does exist, but I couldn't find it very easily. But fortunately, you don't have to use theirs. There's another one called OpenConnect, the VPN client, which is free, and you can use that as well. And I'll show you that in just a moment. And then other than that, all you need are cisco.com and or juniper.com login credentials, which also is free. You don't have to purchase any products from them or have any contracts with them in order to have just basic login privileges, which give you access to these things right here. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to do the majority of our time with Cisco's DevNet Sandbox labs because there's more features, more things you can do on that. The Juniper VLabs are much more restrictive in what access rights they give you. So most of what I have to talk about will be Cisco, but we will talk about Juniper as well. All right, so number one, let's talk about finding a lab. So if you weren't already familiar with this URL, you might want to grab a screenshot of that or something. developer.cisco.com/site/sandbox. Let me move something over here. Okay, and let's just take a look at what that looks like. So this is it. Let me move this out of the way. So when you go to that site, this is what you see. And if you guys, I believe I'm sharing my screen. So if you guys can't see this, please let me know. But I think we're all right. Okay, don't see anybody screaming that they can't see or hear me. So once you get here, the first thing you're going to want to do is to log in. And so right now it shows me as having logged in, but this is where you would need, let me just log out of here. Log out. Okay, so this is what you would see. And if you don't have a login credentials, just click where it says sign up free right there, and then go ahead and log in. I log in with my Cisco ID. Okay, step number two is you're going to want to click right here where it says Sandbox Catalog. And that will take you to all of the various sandboxes. That should come up here momentarily. It better. Of course, this would be the one time. You know what? Even if it doesn't, I have a quick screenshot of what that looks like. Right here. So you'll get a page that looks like this, and you'll get a lot more than this. I don't know why their page is taking so long. Fortunately, I grabbed the screenshot, but each one of these, here we go. Okay, now it's coming up. Still coming up. Okay, each one of these boxes here, and there's rows and rows and rows of these boxes. I just grabbed 2 rows on my screenshot. But each one of these is a sandbox environment where you can get in there and play around with their stuff for free. You'll notice that some of them say always on. So those are the ones that are the shared environments. Okay, you don't reserve it for an hour or 5 hours. You can get in there any point in time, but other people could be in there as well. And so they actually say, you know, be polite, think about that fact as you're doing things that other people could be using that sandbox at the same time. You have no way of knowing when you get in there if someone's in there as well. Okay, and then the other ones though, like for example, these here that say reserve, those are ones that you can actually reserve. Now, as I'm talking to you, I had to figure out, okay, who's my audience going to be? And as I was playing around with these things, what I naturally gravitate to was people studying for Cisco certification exams. And because, I am a specialist in the enterprise exams like the CCNA and the CCNP Enterprise and the CCIE, that's sort of where my focus is. So if that is what you're studying for, if you're preparing for the CCNA all the way up to the CCIE Enterprise, then you're most likely going to want to rent time on either Cisco Modeling Labs Enterprise or Cisco Modeling Labs. Really, the main difference between these two, I would recommend the Enterprise version, because if you rent time on Cisco Modeling Labs, you can only rent that for 5 hours maximum. And you know, that's a good day to practice with, but Cisco Modeling Labs Enterprise, you can actually rent that for up to 5 days, not just 5 hours, but 5 days. So you could have that reserved for a whole week. So you can go back to it at any point in time and you haven't lost anything. Because that's what happens. Once your reservation expires, it's gone. It tears down and all of your configurations and everything are history. Now I will show you, however, how to save your configurations, because you know, naturally, your reservation is going to expire at some point, and you probably want to save all of your work so the next time you reserve this lab, you can just upload all the stuff you were previously working on and you don't have to start from scratch. I will show you how to do that. But takeaway here is I would recommend you use Cisco Modeling Labs Enterprise. Now, another interesting thing, just a little quirk I noticed about this was that, and maybe I can show it to you right here. Okay, so here's the actual website. If I go down here, notice how Cisco Modeling Labs Enterprise does not show up. That's because I've already reserved it. It doesn't mean that it's gone and not available. It's just I already have an active reservation for that particular sandbox, and so it doesn't show up here for me. And if I tried to reserve anything else, it would not let me do it. You can only reserve one thing at a time. Somebody in the chat asked me if you could do stuff related to data center in here. Now, I'm not a data center guy, but I'm pretty sure if we scrolled through this, because there's a lot of stuff in here, they probably have data center related sandboxes. You wouldn't want to use Cisco Modeling Labs for that, but they have a whole bunch of stuff that you can see. All right, so somebody wanted me to put this in the chat window. That is a great idea. There you go. Okay. Oh, and somebody says on the top left, select data center. Hey, there's an idea. Okay. Let's see here. Catalog. Available, unavailable. Oh, okay. Up here on actually the top right. Browse by category. So yeah, we could browse by data center. And I'm sure something will pop up. Although for some reason their site seems to be slow today. I'm not sure what's going on. But anyway. Okay, so let's focus on Cisco Modeling Labs right now, though. So step number one is you get to this page, okay, and then you find Cisco Modeling Labs Enterprise, because that's the one that's got the 5 hours, and you click on the reserve button. Now, once you do that, come on, where are you? Okay, then this is what you'll see. Something that looks like this. So it'll actually tell you, it'll default to 4 hours, but you can try clicking on these things. For example, if you try clicking on weeks, nothing happens because you can't reserve it for 1 week or more. But if you click on days, you can see you can go all the way up to 5 days. So just select 5 days and then select reserve. Okay. And then it takes, maybe 10 minutes or so to reserve. So just kick back and relax. And then once the reservation is done, you'll know it because you will get an email that looks like this. Because remember, as part of signing onto that page, you had to provide them your email address. And so they know how to email you. You'll get some sort of an email saying your Cisco DevNet Sandbox lab is ready. And this right here, when you establish a VPN, you're not actually going to be establishing a VPN to an IP address. You're going to be establishing it to this URL right here. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So this will be very critical that you write that down and just reference that. The other thing about this URL here is that each time you reserve this, like let's say it expires, and then later on tonight I go to reserve it again. For me, the first portion of the URL is always exactly the same thing. The one thing that changes is the port number. So the port number always changes. So just remember that, because sometimes the VPN clients that you use, like AnyConnect, will cache the port number. And if I try VPN to my previous lab, it won't work. So I'll have to manually change the port number. I'll show you an example of that with Cisco's AnyConnect client. So here's their AnyConnect client right here. And it already caches this because I was in it previously. Let me just zoom in on this a little bit. There we go. So right now, Let's see, do I even have the right port number in here? No. Okay, so see, this is an old one. Let's go ahead and go down to here. I put this right here, overlay it right there, and there we go. Okay, so you see, when I took this screenshot, my lab was 20162. That's gone, that's expired, and so the last time I was on it, it was 20197. So the port number will change. Now, if you choose to use the Open Connect free VPN client, and also AnyConnect is free as well. As a matter of fact, I'll show you right here, and I see a couple hands being raised. I'll look at your questions in just a second. There's a question of, is it possible to use serial interfaces? No, not in Cisco Modeling Labs. All you have available to you are gigabit Ethernet interfaces, at least on the routers and switches and stuff I've been using. I know they don't have serial. They might have other types of like WAN interfaces, but I know they don't have serial interfaces. So let's go back to, let's see here, reset filters. And what I want to show you, oh man, it's slow. Okay. Well, it'll come up here in a moment. So I'll just describe it as their website is coming up. As a matter of fact, let's just see, because sometimes Chrome has issues. Let's see if I can speed this up by using Safari. I don't have anything running that will slow me down. Okay, well, apparently their website right now when I'm doing the webinar decides to be slow. When you first click on any of these things, and if I click on one, it's probably just going to wait for a while, it'll bring you another screen. And that screen will have off to the left 3 tabs. Like one tab will give you like an overview of the lab. It'll have a little picture in there of what the lab topology is. It'll describe what the lab was designed to do. It'll give you your usernames and passwords, not for your VPN, because that's what they give you via email. But once you get in there, a lot of these devices already have, for example, enable passwords pre-configured, SSH passwords pre-configured. It's pretty much always Cisco. All right, let's see if I can do this here. Let's just try. Well, this is interesting, how it's actually showing up even though I have it reserved. That's not a good sign. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So here on the left talks about what the lab is for, but the main things I want you to take away from this is types of access. You know, once I've reserved the lab, how do I get into it? Well, the main way you'll get into it is via your web browser. So you'll actually open up your web browser and you'll open up a new tab and you'll just go to this address, 10.10.20.161. That address never changes. Every single time you do the lab, once you VPN'd in, that's the address you'll put in your URL bar up here, 10.10.20.161. And then you'll be given a login page, and you can see here your username and credentials are always the exact same thing, developer and Cisco 12345. And that'll get you into the web browser. I personally have not played around with some of these other things, like they have a dev box right here. I haven't played around with that, so I can't speak to that. I don't know what its capabilities are or what you would do. Also on here, it gives you the IP addresses of each box. So for example, if I click on this particular lab, hopefully this image will come up here, comes pre-configured with a topology of about 8 devices. Now you can choose to use that topology, or what I'll show you in a moment, assuming everything here works, is you can build your own topology in here and just skip what they have. All right, so let's bring this up a little bit. All right, so here's their own pre-configured topology. They have a couple of routers, a couple of Nexus switches, some hosts, and these are all given, they're already pre-configured with IP addresses. They already have access to you. So once you VPN in, you actually have direct access to this stuff. So these things you can actually get to. Now let me go ahead and VPN in myself. Okay. So, and the credentials I'm typing in, I got from an email that they sent me. I showed you an example of that email. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in the password. Okay, good. So the VPN is now connected. So now I can just go to that IP address of 10.10.20.61, And because I've already gone into this before, the credentials are cached, but it said this right on that page. It said your username and password is developer and then Cisco12345. It was on that page I showed you. So you just log in here. And then now you're into the Cisco Modeling Lab sort of GUI front end. And so these boxes, right now there's only one. This box is a pre-configured lab that is part of the Sandbox. So if I click on that box, these are the devices are there by default. So they already pre-configured this for you. If you're not familiar with Cisco Modeling Labs, these little green circles right there indicate that the device is already powered up and ready to go. If it wasn't powered up, when you hovered over it, right here on the left, it would be green with a little triangle, and that's how you would start the device, by clicking on that. If I click on this right now, it'll shut the device down. And so to get into any of these things, okay, these pre-configured ones, you just click on this black semicircle, which gives you a console connection. Just click on Open Console. And over here, where it says columns and rows, you probably want to set the columns to auto. And then now just click Enter, and you are in. And if anything has a password, it's just Cisco. So those are the pre-configured things. Also, just want to show you, let me get out of here for just a moment. And okay, so we were back to looking at this. We'll go back into the front end in just a moment. Okay, so there's the IP address. There's the username and password we talked about, which is always the exact same thing. Networking devices, so these are, like I said, the ones that are pre-built in there. So once you VPN'd into the lab using AnyConnect or OpenConnect VPN client or whatever, you could use your own SSH client like PuTTY or Secure CRT or something right on your laptop and SSH directly into these IP addresses, because your VPN connection's already up. It's already ready to go. It says method telnet, but I've actually found that they are enabled for SSH as well, okay? Now, here's the, all right, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. Let me go back to where we were looking at here. So we've talked about the reservation process. I got so much stuff I want to tell you about this, but I don't want to get off track. All right, so I've showed you the reservation button. We've talked about the amount of time you can do. We've talked about that you'll get an email, which will give you your VPN username and password, VPN clients. If you want to use OpenConnect, that website there from Cisco talks about how you use OpenConnect. Basically, you could Google it, OpenConnect VPN, and then here's the OpenConnect website, and then you could just download it for whatever operating system you're doing. And then the process of using OpenConnect is super easy. So basically, once you have it, now in my system, I have to use sudo super user do. So I do sudo OpenConnect. And then according to Cisco's website, where they're describing how to use OpenConnect, they would say the next thing you want to do is you want to put in the network. And remember, the network was that big, long thing that looked like this. Paste, okay? Now you can do that, but I want to show you what will happen. Now I'm just going to hit enter. Okay, that password is my super user password on my local computer here. Okay. All right, so now it's giving me a username. That is the username that I got on my email that they sent me from my VPN credentials. And then the password was also in that email, which is just a long string of letters and numbers. I shouldn't talk while I'm doing this. Okay. Okay, so it terminated my Cisco VPN client. Okay, so now I've got it. So now I'm connected. So same thing, now that I'm connected to that, I can go to that website, 10.10.20.161, and I can get in there. Now, little caveat though, little gotcha about this. What you'll notice is, notice this message right here, DTLS handshake failed. I'm going to start seeing that message periodically over and over and over again. Now, if all I want to do is access the Sandbox via the web browser like this, who cares? I can just minimize my terminal. I don't need my terminal for anything, and I can just do everything via the GUI right here. But if you actually want to SSH into the pre-built devices right here using your own secure CRT or PuTTY or something, you will not be able to do that. I don't know exactly why. All I just know is that because this DTLS handshake failed, external SSH connection, at least for me, didn't work. But there is a workaround, a way around that. So I'm going to cancel this. I'm just going to hit Control-C on my keyboard. Okay, so now that VPN is done. Here's a quick little tip. I'll zoom in on here so you can see a little bit better. Use the same command, sudo openconnect, but after the word openconnect, you want to put in this argument, --no -DTLS. Okay, so sudo openconnect and then this keyword. This says don't try DTLS. Like I said, technically I don't know why this fixes that problem, but now when I VPN in, I can type in my credentials. Okay, I can type in the password they gave me. And now I'm in, and now if I wanted to, for example, now I could open up another window and let's take a look here. Let's try going to 10.10.20.175. SSH 10.10.20.175. And I should be able to get into it. It's been a while since I've done this. Back when I was creating my Ansible course is when I discovered this little weird thing here. Hold on a second. Well, let's just, actually you might have to enable SSH on here. Let's just do it real quick. Let's just check. 10.10.175 should be router 1. Let's go to router 1 real quick. Okay, show run. And let's make sure he's got everything necessary for SSH access. If he's missing something, we could always add it. I'm not going to spend a lot right now, though. Okay, well, we see some crypto. So he's got a crypto key. Okay, that's good. And, oh, I think I remember what it was. If we go down to his lines, well, it says transport input telnet SSH, login local, password Cisco. Okay, off the top of my head, I don't know why the SSH is not working. I know you can though. I know you can get to work because I've done it before. But that was my point, is that if you want to do that, use your own SSH client, just make sure you put in that no DTLS keyword when you're reserving it, like we see up here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll just leave that up. That's fine. All right, let me quickly check the questions before I move on to see, because I don't want to miss too much stuff. Yeah, so a quick question here. Do they have a Sandbox with Catalyst switches as well, like doing multiple spanning trees, voice VLANs, and stuff like that? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'll get to that. You can use this exact same Sandbox I'm looking at right here, so we'll talk about that. Let's see, what else? Scroll down here. I think Brittany said that this will be recorded, and all you guys who registered, guys and gals who registered, will get a link to the recording. I believe that's how we do it. Let's see. Okay, I already talked about OpenConnect. If you're using Windows, I believe there is an Open Connect version for Windows, or you can just download their Cisco's AnyConnect VPN client. That is available. So when you go when you're back here, if you click on the VPN Access tab, right here, it says download the Cisco AnyConnect VPN client software. So from there, if you click on that, it gives you the ability to download it for your Windows or Mac. So that's how you can download their Cisco's VPN client software. But you don't get the username and password until you actually reserve the lab, and then the email comes to you. That's when you get that, because that changes every single time. Okay, so Nurlan, let's see. Okay, so we've talked about that. We've talked about that. I've shown you how to do Open Connect, okay. There are some differences when using Cisco Modeling Labs here within Cisco's Sandbox environment, as opposed to if you actually paid for your own subscription of Cisco Modeling Labs and you installed it on your own server or laptop. For example, and this goes back to Nurlan, what you were talking about. So if you have your own registered version of Cisco Modeling Labs, you can actually log into Cisco's website, and there's a page where you can see, you know, what are all the subscriptions I have? What are all the software products I've downloaded? And it'll say you've got a 1-year license for Cisco Modeling Labs. And within that website, because you paid for that, it actually gives you the ability to open up and see all the software images that come with Cisco Modeling Labs, like their their switching software, their IOSV, their CSRVs, and you can actually download those images as separate independent images, which you could then install in like VMware ESXi or something as individual VMs. Can't do that here because that, you know, because you don't own it, right? You're using their free version of Cisco Modeling Labs, so you don't have access to download the images when you're doing it via this method right here. So that was a very good question. Okay, so where else were we? Yep, the reservation of Sandboxes is free. You don't have to worry about that. So we talked about Open Connect, talked about the command to do it. All right. I showed you the reservation email. Okay, so let's talk about some of these things I've already covered. Some of the stuff is just a reminder for me. What can you do? Okay, I talked about how you can SSH to pre-built nodes in the sample labs. You can modify existing topologies. Let's look at that. This is one of the things I think is really cool. So here I am in this particular topology. Okay, and let's say somebody asked about switches. Somebody asked about iOS switches. No problem. See over here on the right where it's got this little green button that says Add Nodes? I can just click that, and all of these things I can drag and drop into this topology. So for example, if I want to deal with a switch, I would do IOSV L2, just drag and drop it. Come on, you can get in there. Let's see, maybe I'm not connected. Am I connected to the VPN? Let me just check, because if I'm not, that would explain why I can't do anything. No, I am connected. Unable to add node. This usually works. You know what? Just to rule out, this shouldn't be a problem with Open Connect, but just in case, let's just go ahead and use the Cisco AnyConnect VPN client. Okay, and let me find that password again. But as I'm doing this, that's typically what you would do, is you would open that up and then just drag and drop the particular nodes that you want into the topology. Okay, so let's try this again. Okay, come on up. Okay, click on their pre-built thing here. All right, so let's see. Oh, look at that. It actually did do it before. So let's say I want to do a couple of them to practice spanning tree. Make your typical spanning tree triangle, right? I can drag that in there. Has a couple Nexus things. Maybe drag in an IOSV router, something like that. And then the way you connect these is you hover over it and see that blue thing up at the top. So right now these are not started. This would be to start it. This is the connector tool. So basically you just click that and then just drag and drop where you want your connection to go. And so this will say, okay, I want to connect from gig 00 to gig 00. And there it is. Now I want to connect down here. From gig 01 to gig 01. So that's how you connect these things together. 01 to 01. This is being very unfriendly today. Let's connect this here. Of course, the fan in my MacBook right now is running like a freight train, so it could have something to do with that. I'm not sure what that is. So that's how you connect them. And then you just start them up by clicking. Well, there's actually two ways you could start them up. You could start them up by clicking this little green thing right here, or you could go down and click on where it says nodes. And this shows you all of your nodes. And this way, if you want to, you can start multiple things at once. For example, I could select that switch, and then start those two switches by just clicking Start Selected. And you'll see here, see it says queued, and then this will change, defined. The CPUs here will spike for a couple seconds, and now they're starting it up. And I could actually watch the startup process, just open up a console connection, clicking on the black here. Once again, you probably want to select auto for your columns. Come on, you can do it. Auto, and it's starting up. And so this is typically how you would access the command line, is from within the web GUI like this. All right, so we've talked about modifying the topology by dragging, dropping stuff. Now here's something else you could do. This is what I think is really cool. So I could go here to Lab Manager, okay? Click Lab Manager, and that takes you back to this screen. Remember how I said that this box shows you all the labs you have? Well, right now I've just got one, which is their pre-built lab. But I could actually start a new lab. Look at this, where it says Add Lab. I could just click that, give it a title, like how about OSPF Lab. All right, now click inside of it. Now this is a clean slate. Now I can just drag and drop in here a wide variety of topologies of routers and switches and stuff, start configuring them, and I don't even have to touch their pre-built topology. If this doesn't interest me at all, I can just create my own topologies. Now, pros and cons to this. All right, if you plan on accessing the command line of all these things purely in the browser, right, just by hovering over something and clicking here and accessing it, then create topologies to your heart's content, right? If you're going to create another topology, like over here in OSPF Lab, I don't know, clearly all of these are VMs running on some server somewhere. I think actually Cisco is using Amazon Web Services as their cloud hosting for all these VMs. So there's clearly some actual physical limitation to CPU and memory and stuff. I don't know what that is. I don't want to hit that limitation, whatever it is. So if I'm going to create my own lab, I'm going to go over here to the multi-platform lab, and I'm going to click the Stop Lab button. I'll just do that. And notice here the number starts going down. This number here in green are all of the active devices in that lab. And right now they're all being powered off, which frees up memory and CPU resources on wherever this thing is hosted for me to add additional stuff to my own lab. Now, a question you might be asking is, Keith, how wild and crazy can I get with this? How big can I make my topology? I have no idea. I've never actually tested the limits of this thing. But if you find out, please let me know. I'd like to know that. Typically, when I'm doing labs on no matter what it is, BGP, multicast, routing, whatever, usually I don't need any more than about 7 or 8 routers and like 2 or 3 switches to do what I want to practice. And this has been able to host that just fine. So like I said, if you plan on accessing the command line via your browser, then you can do this. Just create add lab, and then it'll put a new box here, and then just start dragging and dropping things and connecting them, starting them up, and configure away. However, let's say, for example, that what you want to do required you to use a local SSH client on your own laptop, right? For example, when I was putting my Ansible course together, which is this one right here, I really wanted to, in that course, I show how to download Ansible onto your local machine and then how to use it on your local machine. So I wanted to demonstrate that during my video. So I needed to Ansible requires SSH. You got to be able to SSH to things. So the problem I found was this, that once again, right, you don't own this. This is a free lab. Now, if you actually own Cisco Modeling Labs and you had it on your own local laptop or server, and if you want to get external connectivity to like an external SSH tool, or maybe you got a router switch sitting right on your desktop and you want to connect the routers or switches in CML to the router or switch on your desktop, you could do that. You could use this node over here called the external connector. You could drag that in and then connect your virtual topology to that, and that would give you external connectivity to whatever. However, that doesn't work here. I've tried it. If, like right now, my OSPF lab, if I drag that in, I can start it up, but it does absolutely nothing. It just does not connect to my external stuff here. So that gets me back to this. Back when I was doing Ansible, I said, okay, I need to be able to SSH from my own local SSH client, just like my terminal or something, to something in this lab to show how Ansible works. Creating my own lab doesn't do it. But these devices, you can SSH to, right? These pre-built devices that they've got right here. Now where it gets sticky, though, is you say, well, okay, Keith, so you're telling me that if I want to use external SSH, I have to use their pre-built lab. Yes, because somehow they have pre-configured this bridge to Sandbox and Sandbox backend. You can't get into those. You can't change them. You can't configure them. But they've pre-configured that to be able to have external SSH to this stuff. And then you say, oh, okay, well, why don't I just create some new devices and, just add some links over here to maybe the Sandbox backend. How about this right here to this right here? That'll work, right? Does not work. Does not compute. This guy will not get an IP address. If you put a static IP address on him, this won't work. I've done a little bit of playing around with this. There is a tricky way that you can do it. Basically, what I believe is going on, now this might be above and beyond what you guys care to know, but I believe they have some filters in here, some like VACLs or MAC access lists or something that only allow SSH going to, let me just delete this link right here. So I'm going to click on the link and then click delete link. Okay. They've got filters and stuff in place so that when you have an external SSH connection coming in, it's only allowed under two conditions. Number one, if that external SSH connection is going to one of these links right here. Okay, so actually it's not even really a link. Each one of these links is connected to a port. So for example, if I click on the link like that one right there, see how the Sandbox backend is going to port 7? Okay, if I connected to one of the unused ports, it's like those ports are blocked off. You can't connect to those. It won't do anything. So number one, if I want to SSH to like my iOS v0, which I just dragged and dropped, I'd have to do two things. Number one, I'd have to go on to like distribution router 2 and say, okay, gigabit Ethernet 1, what's his MAC address? So I'd have to go on there, do a show interface command, copy his MAC address, and then I would take note of what port he's connected to, port 7. So I'd say, okay, so I would delete this link, port 7. Okay. And then I go over here, and now because port 7 is free, I will connect it here to port 7. So like gig 00 to port 7. Okay, because that port is open. And then this guy's not started yet, but I would start him up. and I would go onto his interface, gig00, and I would change his MAC address to be whatever distribution router 2 was. That gets it around it. So now, once I do that, and I would put the exact same IP address on his interface that distribution router 2 has, which it actually showed you right in here, right? Distribution router 2 is 10.10.20.176. So basically, I'm replicating distribution router 2 on a node that I dragged in there. If you do that, then you can directly SSH to that. Another more complicated way you could do it is just keep these existing connections right here, but implement NAT on these routers and do port translation on there. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but that works as well. Suffice it to say that ideally, if you can, just stick with using the GUI here to get into the command line of these routers and switches. Now, next thing I want to show you is, let's say you've been doing this. Okay, you create your own topology, and now you want to, you can save it. I'll show you how to save it in just a second. And then now it expires, it's done. And now let's say a day later, you want to re-import that topology. Here's what happens. Now, I know I'm sort of going in reverse order. I haven't showed you how to save it yet, but I will. I'll go back to that. Here's what you do. You go back to Lab Manager. I'm going to get rid of this lab here. Don't need it. Okay. And see where it says Import Lab? When you save a lab, and I haven't shown you how to do that yet, but when you save a lab, it actually saves it. It downloads it to your local system as a YAML file. For example, see this one right here, which says IGP redistribution filtering .yaml. That is a Cisco Modeling Labs topology that I created from scratch that I downloaded to my own local device. So now I can just upload that, and that actually contains configurations and everything. So I can say import lab. I can find that file. Downloads, there it is, iDistribution YAML. Click open. Click upload topology. And now it's in there. Now if I click, for example, Lab Manager, there it is. There it is. Now if I go to that, the nodes right now are shut down. So I'll just start up a couple of them. Okay, so this is a lab I already did. So I can go back to this reservation time and time again and keep uploading this lab and start off from where I left off. I don't have to recreate everything from scratch. Now, here's the problem. You might say, okay, Keith, let's go back to this. You said, I've decided that I want to have external SSH connectivity. So you've told me I have to use this pre-built lab and like do all this manipulation to it to do that. Great. Okay. So my reservation's almost done. Oh, okay. I better save this lab. Now, the way you save a lab is right here. You click on Download Lab. Okay. And that will actually download the YAML file to your system. Here's the problem, though. Once I start a new reservation, like tomorrow or the next day, okay, it's going to give me this default topology, right? And I say, oh, well, you know, the last time I was in here, I added this, I added that, I configured all this weird NAT stuff, changed MAC addresses around, and I downloaded it. So all I'll just do is I'll just go to Lab Manager and I'll click Import Lab, and it should bring this right back with my additions and with my changes, and I should be able to SSH to it, right? Not going to work, because what you're going to see if I did that is I would see another box right here, you know, that looks like this. It would have all my configurations in it, but remember that bridge to Sandbox and Sandbox backend that I see in a third box right here, that's not the same nodes as the one in the first box. So whatever configurations they have on these devices here, whatever filtering, whatever they're doing on the back end, that does not get saved when you do a download lab, when you save the lab. That stuff does not get saved. So if you try importing this lab later on, you'll see these icons, but your external SSH connectivity will be gone. So the only time you can externally SSH into this stuff is if you start it and you use their pre-built one right here, and you build onto it. That's one of the reasons I recommend doing the Cisco Modeling Labs Enterprise, because you get it for a full 5 days, and you don't have to worry about having to do all those gyrations ever again. Woo! All right, a lot of stuff there. Let me see, what else? So we talked about creating new topologies in labs. I showed you how to do that. So we talked about how once you're in a lab, oh, yes, let me show you this. Okay, so let's get, this guy should be up by now, hopefully. Okay, yes, he is. Oops. Okay, so watch this. I'm just going to make a small change to this guy. I'm just going to change his host name. Because what I'm trying to demonstrate here is when you click that download lab button to download it locally as a YAML file, by default, it will not collect your most recent configs. And so there's something you have to do for that. So config T, this is give him a host name of Keith-router. And, okay, now watch this. If I go to Lab Manager, no, let's go back to here. If I go to here and I say download lab, okay, downloads it as a YAML file. Now that was, I believe, let's see here. That was router 1 I was dealing with. So let me open up this YAML file. If I click on it. And what you'll see, if it takes a little while, I'm not going to show it to you, but what you see, if you scroll through the YAML file here, see all the stuff here that says building configuration? By default, that would not be in there. That would not be there. And so let's see here. All right, IOSV. All right, router 1. Okay, see, look at this. Label router 1 right here. Host name R1. I changed that. I changed that to Keith router. Why is it not in there? All right, here's the thing. Before you download the lab, you're going to want to do this. It takes a little bit of time, but you're going to want to click on each node and click on where it says edit config. Okay? And then click on update configuration from device. You might have to do this a couple of times. And I've noticed that when I do it a couple of times, I always get this error message, unable to load configuration. But watch, if we pay attention to the host name here, we should see in a couple of seconds, it actually will be successful in reaching out to that node and getting the revised configuration. This should change at some point very, very soon to Keith router. Sometimes you have to click this multiple times. There it is. See that? Now it changed. So now if I did that for all of my nodes, now I can download the lab and all the configurations are saved. So the next time I import that lab, the topology will be there and the configs will be there. Very important, because after all, you don't want to lose your configs or you've wasted days worth of work, right? All right, what else do we have? What you can't do. I already talked about this. If you drag and drop new nodes, you can't SSH to them unless you do that complicated process I talked about with their original pre-built topology. You can't mess around with software upgrades and downgrades. So if that's what you wanted to practice was, upgrading your software, you're not going to be able to do that here. I talked about the external connector node doesn't work in the Sandbox. Explore the functionality of hardware-based features and commands. So especially like on switches, for example, if you've ever played around with quality of service on a Cisco Catalyst switch, switches implement most of what they do in hardware, in ASICs and memory and stuff like that. The CPU doesn't get involved in a lot of what the switching stuff does. Now, Cisco's done a really good job with these nodes here. Let's pull this over, add nodes. So these nodes here, the IOSV L2 right there, that has pretty much everything, every feature you'll ever need to practice as far as like CCNA, CCNP, and even CCIE Enterprise. I'd say 90% of what you need to do is built in there, even though in reality, those features would run in hardware. But some stuff, For example, back when I worked at Cisco, I learned of all these really nitty-gritty hardware-based commands to troubleshoot QoS. I don't even remember them anymore, but it's like show QoS TCAM this and show blah, blah, blah that. And it dug into like the TCAMs, it dug into the memory, and you could really see great statistics. Clearly, those commands won't even be available in here because this is not a real switch, right? It's a software-based switch. So anything that's purely related to hardware, you're not going to have access to that. And perform sniffer captures from your own machine. All right, I found a workaround to this. If you're like me and you're learning a new technology for the first time, like multiple spanning trees or OSPF or something, one of the best ways to learn it is to do a sniffer capture and actually see the packets. Well, okay, once again, here's the difference between owning Cisco Modeling Labs and using the free version. So in the free version, I'll go back to it here. You can click on, for example, a link like this one right here. I'm clicking on the link, and notice how it says packet capture? You might think, oh, this is really awesome. It's a sniffer. Well, kinda. If I click on that, it does allow me to capture packets. Let's just do it for like 15 seconds and click start. But watch this. Actually, I don't know if these guys are even doing anything right now. Okay. So you don't really see a lot, right? Like, for example, if you want to see all the layer 2 headers, if you want to see your source and destination MAC address, your Ethernet type code, you're not going to see it here. If you want to see the body of your OSPF hello packet or the body of your EIGRP update, you're not going to see it here. Very limited. Now, if you actually owned Cisco Modeling Labs yourself, there's another button that you would see here that would actually allow you to download this as a PCAP file, and then you could open it up within Wireshark and actually see everything. But you don't have that here. When you're doing the free version, you say, oh my gosh, Keith, you tell me I can't do real sniffer captures? Well, there is a way. It's a little complicated, but here's what you want to do. Let's say I want to do a sniffer capture between these two routers I've turned on right now. Here's how you would do it. Number one, I would delete that link. Okay, so let's first of all make note of that link. It's gig 03 on both sides. All right, so I would delete it. Yes. And then what I would do is I would bring in a switch like this one right here, pop them in there. I would connect these guys up to the switch. All right, it's gig 03 on both sides. All right, it's gig 03 to gig 02. All right, and then I would grab, see how it has right here, desktop as a node? Grab the desktop, pull it in, connect him up to that switch. It says Ethernet 0 right there, okay? Turn everybody on right here, turn this guy on. This will take a moment, but what you'll see is once this desktop is open, if I click on him, notice how it has a VNC option. Once this desktop comes up, I'm not sure how long it takes. Let's just try it right now. Open VNC. All right, so it's loading. But this actually gives you sort of like a, it's very similar to Ubuntu. If you guys have ever played around with Ubuntu as a desktop, it's a similar look and feel to that. All right, here we go. Linux user. Password, what do you think it is? Cisco, of course, because that's what everything is in here. Cisco. Log in. Come on. CISCO. Log in. And then as this comes up, there we go. In here, now it does have Wireshark. There actually is Wireshark in here, but here's a little catch. If you try opening up Wireshark like this, all right, so if you scroll down, you'll see that Wireshark is in here. Here we go. If you try opening that up, launch, you'll get frustrated very, very quickly because you'll say, okay, I want to capture on Ethernet 0. All right, start. It says, you don't have permissions to do that. What the heck? Why is it there if I don't have permissions? There is a way around that. So close that up, close up Wireshark, and you're going to actually open it from terminal with the sudo command. You want to open it up with super user privileges. So sudo Wireshark. Now this is actually really also kind of cool. And this is a difference I'm going to contrast between Cisco Sandbox and Juniper Sandbox. In Cisco Sandbox, when you bring in these nodes like the desktop node, you actually have full control over it. You can use the super user command, you can add routes to it, you can change the IP address. So when you use the sudo command, it actually says, respect the privacy of others, think before you type. Yeah, okay, I got it. So I'm gonna put in Cisco as my password. And now it opens up Wireshark, and now I can start capturing things. So now you got a full-blown Wireshark, not as elegant as doing it on your own local system, but hey, it works, right? I don't think there's any way to save this. You know, if you might be thinking, okay, well, how would I save this PCAP file and send it to me locally? I don't know that necessarily you can do that. There might be a way. I've never actually tried that. But there it is. Now, also keep in mind that using this method right here, let's quit without saving. All right. And you know, it's always a little slow when you go into this desktop node here, but it is better than nothing. Log out. Log out. All right, and let's go back to here. Now keep in mind that in order to do this, I had to import in this iOS VL2 switch, right? And think about how switches operate. Normally, if router 1 is sending something to router 5 or back and forth, think about it. Under what conditions will that traffic be sent to the switch and the switch will forward it over here? Only stuff that has to be flooded, right? Broadcasts, multicasts, and that's it. So, for example, if I did a ping from router 1 to router 5, I would see the initial ARP request because that is flooded, but I would not see the pings. So you say, well, Keith, what good is that to me? I actually want my sniffer to capture everything. Well, in order to do that, you'll have to use the span feature. So you have to go onto the switch right here, configure the span feature, using this interface right here, or maybe this one, doesn't matter, as your span source. Use the span direction of both so it captures both directions, and then have this interface right here as your span destination interface. Then everything that comes in or goes out of your span source will be sent out here as a copy, and now you'll see it in your sniffer. So kind of a long way to get sniffer working, but if you're like me, it's kind of critical when you're learning stuff to know how to use Wireshark. And that's pretty much the only way to do it, because the links themselves don't support that unless you add a switch and a desktop. All right. I think that's it as far as Cisco is concerned. Yep. Okay. So before I move on to Juniper VLabs, and this is going to be a lot shorter because you're very much restricted in what you can do and not do in Juniper VLabs. Let me go back to the questions real quick and see if there's anything else I haven't answered. All right. Okay, so anonymous. It would take me a while to do that, but basically what you would want to do is, if this is the router that came pre-built into the topology, right? And then that eventually leads off to their Sandbox stuff. What you would want to do is you want to create this interface is your NAT outside interface. I'll just say NO. It doesn't mean no, NAT outside. All right, let's say right here, this is the Keith router. So this is the one that I dragged and dropped in that was not part of the original topology. So this would be my NAT inside interface. Okay, and then on this guy, I would create a static NAT. Okay, so I know that he has an IP address that's pre-configured. Let's see here, where is it? Okay, so he's like 10.10.20.175, something like that. Okay, confirm. All right, so basically what you would do is you create a static NAT assignment saying, okay, anything that comes in here going to SSH port 22, so a static NAT of this is what's going to, it redirects to you could just give this whatever you want, 1.1.1.1. You would have to pre-configure this guy to be listening to SSH. No, it couldn't be 22, because if he sees 22, he's going to think you're natting to him. So basically create like a fake number, like 5001. Okay, so your NAT's going to say, this is a static NAT assignment saying anything that's going to 10.10.20.175, port number 5001, change it to 1111, port number 22. And so now when you're on your SSH console, like your terminal or something, of your laptop, your Mac, if you actually want to SSH to this guy, you would SSH to 10.10.21.75, port number 5001. And now when it comes into this guy, he's got a static NAT translation, and he'll then change it to the actual real destination of 22 and send it over here to that guy. So that's how you would accomplish that. All right, let's see here. So we did that. Okay, Rudy, I wish I could help you with that, but right now I have to focus on Sandboxes. I can't get too much into our rack rentals. If we have time at the end, we've already gone over an hour. I'll see if I can do that. Let's see here. Can IPsec be tested with free Cisco modeling labs? Absolutely, absolutely. You can create static, IPsec site-to-site tunnels between these routers and practice that. Absolutely, you can. Is that a TCP dump with BPF filters then? I don't know. I don't know if that's behind the scenes how they're doing it, but you saw it's very, I think even TCP dump gives you more detail than what we saw there when we did that packet thing. Studying for the Encore test, is there a good place you can recommend for a lab config for each topic after studying? So I assume you're asking about, is there a place I can go that have pre-built configs? The best thing I would recommend for that is if you go to, let me pull this over here. If you go to my.ine.com, okay, and once you're logged in, on the upper right-hand corner here, if you click where it shows your image or whatever, you can click on workbooks. Okay, we don't have any existing workbooks for the current Encore exam, but here's the thing. I would say probably 75 to 80% of the topics that were previously covered in the CCNP route switch exams, the CCNP route, CCNP switch, and CCNP T-shoot carried over to the Encore. Now there's other stuff in Encore as well, like multicast and QoS that you didn't previously have to do with CCNP. But I would say that if you rent time on INE's racks and you work through like the T-shoot workbook, the switch workbook, the route workbook, and some of the CCIE ones, like the CCIE V4 workbooks, that should give you practice with a good majority of what you'll see on the Encore exam. Now, of course, that requires you to rent time with our rack rentals. And our rack rentals are right here. Click on rack rentals. All those CCNP ones I just showed you, if you want to go through those, you'd want to rent time on the CCNA CCNP routing and switching rack, right, which is 3 tokens an hour, which translates to $3 an hour. The CCIE workbooks, you'd want to rent time on the CCIE routing and switching V5 rack, okay? All right, so that answers that. Let's see here. Is there any SD-WAN lab pre-configured? I know they have SD-WAN nodes. I have not played around with this because I am not that familiar with SD-WAN, but I know for here with nodes, notice that you've got vEdge, vBond, vSmart, vManage. So you can drag and drop those in here and create a topology. That's as far as I go, though. I don't know SD-WAN beyond that, so I don't know what capabilities those guys have. I assume they're not configured with anything when you first drag them in. Okay, we can get rid of you And what else do we have here? Okay, under the tools menu, there's a download called the breakout tool. That is used for connecting your SSH clients to the CML topology. Under the tools, there's a download tool called the breakout tool. Let's see. I have not seen that. Maybe in regular CML, but like if I look here, for example, here, there's no download lab, force wipe, under lab manager, tools. Okay, breakout tool, interesting. Okay, so according to Dan, we can use this breakout tool. I have not tried it, but Dan, thank you for that. So everybody, you know, if you try this, try the breakout tool, and maybe that'll give you a much easier way to get external SSH access to your devices. Thank you for that, Dan. I will absolutely be trying that out. I appreciate that. Can we practice ICE, FMC, and FTD2? You'd have to look under that first page I showed you that had all the different sandbox labs available. You just have to see if they have one there for that. I do not know. Once I've done the lab, am I able to export my lab with all the topology and configurations? Yes, we talked about how to do that. Already covered that. Could you save those modified topologies in order to use them later? Yes, we covered that. That was the download. And we talked about catalyst switches. I showed you where that was. That was the IOSV L2. And yes, the access is free. So if you do just regular Cisco modeling labs, that's a maximum of 5 hours. If you do modeling labs enterprise, that's 5 days. All right. Is it possible to connect CLM, internet connection, or GNS3? No, not in the sandbox here. If you actually own CML, yes, but not in this free sandbox. You could not do that. How many devices? I don't know. I don't know how big you can make a lab. All right, I don't want to spend, I'll go back to this, but I do want to make sure I cover the Juniper stuff before time gets away from us. So let's talk about the Juniper VLabs. Okay, so for Juniper, here is the link, and I'll go ahead and copy and paste that as well. Actually, I can just do it right here. All right, I'll put that into the chat so you guys have it. There you go. Okay, and for the Juniper Labs, there's no VPN client required, so that's kind of nice. You don't have to worry about having a VPN client. Once again, all you'd have to do is have a free login for Juniper. Okay, so you just, right now I'm logged in, but you know, I don't own any products from Juniper, so. And so these are the labs they have available. So these are standalone devices if you just want to practice out some of the commands. But for me, to really play with this stuff, I need at least 2 devices talking to each other. So for routing, they have several of these pre-built topologies right here. For switching, they have some pre-built topologies with their VQFX switches. They have some security stuff, automation. I haven't played with all that, but you can see there's quite several things here. So once you select something, like for example, if I want OSPF multi-area, you select launch. And then just like Cisco, this will take you to a page that is very similar to what we saw on the launch page for Cisco. Come on. Actually, I have screenshots of this just in case it took a while. Okay. So number 1, you would see this, you know, it'll give you an image, and then to reserve it, you'd click on the reserve button. And when you click on the reserve button, like this, you'll get a picture, you'll get a screen. And these you can't reserve for very long. Okay, these only have a maximum reservable time of 6 hours. So that's a downside, unfortunately, but better than nothing. So you click 6 hours, you would click reserve. Okay, now, unlike Cisco, right, once you reserve it, you have to wait for that email because you need your VPN credentials. There's not going to be VPN credentials here because there's no VPN. So once you reserve it, This screen right here, see up here how it says reserve, this reserve button? Once you've reserved it, that will change and it'll look like this. It'll say setup right there. And it'll give you status updates. It'll say like 7 minutes left or 12 minutes left. And then once setup is complete, you actually will get an email telling you that setup is complete. And that, I don't have a copy of that email, I don't think. Oh yeah, right here. Here it is, Juniper Access email. So really the takeaway from this is that right here. Okay, so all the devices, when you log into them, your username will always be JCL user and your password will always be Juniper Bang 1 with a capital J. Always the same thing. So how you get into these is very simple. So for example, let's see, where is it? Right here. All right, so this one, I have to actually, sometimes this is sort of like a weird quirk that you'll sometimes see where I don't see this very often. Normally what you would see is you'd see your topology right here. Notice how it says active. So I'm actively in here. I reserved this, 3 hours ago or so. And normally your topology would show up, but I'm getting this. But we should be able to get around that. I don't need my Cisco VPN anymore. Let's just try reloading that. There we go. Okay. All right, so I don't want to get off track here. So we've talked about the reservation process. Okay, what you can do and what you can't do in here. Okay, so these labs, for example, this one, because this was the multi-OSPF one, where is it? The OSPF multi-area, if I click on that, this comes already pre-configured with a whole bunch of stuff. The OSPF configurations are already in there, already configured for areas. Your links already have IP addresses. So, and all these labs are like that. If you select the switching lab, it's already got a couple of VLANs in there. It's already got a couple of VLAN trunks in there. So one thing you can do is you can add to that. All right, you can, for example, I could use the same lab and play around with BGP if I want to, or play around with ISIS or RIP if I want to. I'm not stuck with using OSPF. So if I want to, I could get in here and strip all my OSPF out and reconfigure it with BGP or something like that. Now, notice I said add and remove some features. Why do I say some? Well, if you look at this, notice how these things already have IP addresses on them. You do not want to change the IP addresses because if you take out an IP address, you'll lose your connectivity to the VM. And then you'll have to stop your reservation, log out, end it, and restart it again. So you're confined to using the existing IP addresses that are already on these boxes. That's kind of a bummer, but that's the case. Also, some of these labs, for example, if I go back, if we take a look at the switching labs, what the heck? Okay, I don't know why it's doing that. Where was it? Here we go. All right, so for example, the VLANs lab. Let's look in this. This one has some pre-built hosts in it, which you can use to like source pings and things. Here's another sort of downside to this. When you added a host in the Cisco modeling labs, you had full control over that host to change its IP address, change it from static to DHCP, do whatever you wanted. You had full pseudo privileges. Not so here. You don't have any privileges on these hosts. You can't change the IP address. You can't change anything about it. So just be aware of that these hosts, you're confined to what they are and the IP address they have. You can't change that at all. All right, what else? Okay, now you can directly access SSH from all of these things. And let me show you how that works. Okay, well, actually, first of all, let's just look at how you can get in there without direct SSH access. All right, so here I am. No, that one says reserve. Here it says active. Okay, so if I want to get into any of these, the easiest way is just to hover over it and then select SSH. And that will actually open up a new tab and it'll get you into it. The one thing I don't like about this is you can't change this. Like that black and white, I don't know about you, but I can barely read that with my glasses. I don't know if you guys can see or not. I'd like to change the colors so it stands out. Can't do it. I'd like to change the font to make it a little bit bigger. Can't do it. But you know, this is at least basic access right here. So now you can get in. You could do show configuration and look at it. Okay, you can modify the configuration. We talked a little bit about that. All right, so you can do that. But if I actually want to SSH into it from like my terminal application or something where it's a little bit easier for me to look at, you can do that. Here's how you do that. Step number one, find out what your IP address is. What is myip.com? And write it down. All right, so there's mine. Please don't hack me, otherwise I will find you and do nasty things to your computer. All right, 68 right there. All right, and then over here under commands, right here, you're going to click that. Let me minimize this. Click that. And then over here where it says add allowed network prefixes, select that, type in your public IP address. All right, and then down at the bottom, click on run. And this will take a couple of minutes, but after a couple of minutes, I'll be sent an email and it will tell me what the public IP address is for each one of these devices, and what the SSH port number is for each one of these devices. And then once I have that, now I can just publicly SSH into them and do stuff, okay, with my own SSH client. All right, so now I don't want to get ahead of myself here before I say the next thing, what you can't do. Okay, so before I talk about that, so like I said, you can only reserve these for like a maximum of 6 hours. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, maybe by the time 6 hours is done, I've configured part of my really complex BGP and NAT topology and part of my route filters and stuff, but I'm not done yet. Is there a way I can save my configs and then upload them again later? Absolutely. Now, certainly, you know, once you have SSH access from your terminal or something, you can just issue a show config command, copy the configs and paste into like a text editor or something. And then the next time you start up the config, you can just SSH into each device one at a time and then paste those configs back in. Shouldn't take you that long because these topologies aren't that large. Or if you like Ansible like I do, here's something really cool you can do. So you can create, let's see if I can bring it up here. Come on. Where's my terminal app? There we go. Let's drag you over here so you guys can see it. Okay, so if I CD to my Ansible file and then vim my host file. So this is a host file I pre-configured to give me access to that actual topology I was just showing you guys. Okay, it's got the pre-configured username, which is always the same thing, JCL user. It's got the pre-configured password, Juniper Bang 1. And then it's got each host by name, and it gives the IP address. Now that IP address might change. Sometimes it's like, if I restart this lab later on, it might be .13. If I restart it again, it might be .10. That'll tell me in the email. So once I get the actual email, it'll tell me what the IP address has been. Let's see. Have I gotten that email yet? No, I have not gotten it yet. So when I get it, I will show it to you guys. Hold on just a second. I have multiple layers of stuff here. Okay, good. I did get that email. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Right there. So once it does it, it says, okay, here's how you can now do external SSH access. This is actually a great example. So 235.11. So my current host file is .12, right? So I would need to change all of those to .11. And I'm not going to waste time showing you how to do that, but I would change that to .11. And the last time I was in this lab, the port number for these things started with 39. Looks like now it's changed to 31. So I'd want to go through here and substitute all my 39s for 31s. So my host file was correct. And then once that's done and my host file is correct, then I already created for myself this YAML file called Juniper initial configs. Vim Juniper initial configs. And this has all of my set commands for each of my devices. So I can just run the Ansible playbook command and it will automatically SSH into each of the hosts and put in these set commands so that when I reserve this lab again tomorrow or next week, I don't have to redo all these commands or copy and paste them one at a time. That's one of the beautiful things about Ansible. I can just use this file right here. All right, so that is that. Let's see here, was there anything else I wanted to talk about as far as Juniper is concerned? Okay, what you can't do. I talked about how you can't modify the existing topologies. Right. So unlike Cisco, where I could drag and drop new nodes into their pre-built topology, or if I wanted to, just create a whole new lab with a clean slate and create my own lab, can't do that here. So with these Juniper VLabs, this is what you have. You can't change this topology. I can't drag and drop new nodes in here. I can't change the links. I have to work within what they've given me. What else? Just like Cisco, I can't upgrade or downgrade the software versions. If there's anything that's hardware-based, clearly that I would not have access to that. Connect lab devices to external devices. Yeah, so like once again, if I owned Cisco Modeling Lab software, if I had a one-year subscription to that and was running on my laptop, I could use the external network connector tool to connect my virtual routers and switches in CML to a real router switch sitting right here on my desk. I could do that. Can't do that here though, right? So once again, you have to work with the topology that you're given. And you can't perform sniffer captures. This is a real bummer for me because I love doing that, but there is no way that I have found in these VLabs to do that, to do sniffer captures. So I've looked at every single one of these little options in here, and I have not found any way to do that. Okay, and like I said, Juniper is pretty short because you're kind of restricted in what you can do. I talked about how you can access. I said all you got to do is just hover over here, do SSH, and that opens up a new tab. We looked at that, and now I'm in the device. And I think that covers everything I want to talk about. Woo, okay. I went super fast. There's a lot of stuff, but let me now go to the Q&A and see what remaining questions you guys have. All right, and we'll devote like the next, well, let's just see what we've got here. Sam, you're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Okay, we did that. Okay. Rudy, I talked a little bit about that when you say INE has many labs which are great for studying. However, the labs are all over the place. Where can I find help on where to start or how to start? Talked a little bit about that. Just once again, real quickly, if you go to rentals.ine.com, and I will put that into the chat. That'll get you to our rack rentals page. You need to purchase tokens in order to use these things. So if you don't have any tokens, you just go over here to it says purchase tokens. And normally 1 token equals $1. So, you know, you can get as few as 100 tokens all the way up to 1,000 tokens. We have sales sometimes on tokens, so you could look for those. And then once you have tokens, they'll show up over here how many tokens you've got. And then, you know, you can see the racks have a certain amount of tokens per hour. So you can rent time on those. If you click on a rack rental guide, you know, you can see, for example, like the topology of the rack. Like this is our CCNA rack. It has 3 physical switches and 4 physical routers, shows you the connections and everything. So you can do that. And then you can go through our workbooks. I talked a little bit about our workbooks as well. And we have workbooks for all sorts of different technologies you can go through. So we did that. All right, and what else did we have? Is it possible to use Wireshark on a rental rack? Okay, so I'm so anonymous. I assume you're talking about INE's rack rentals. It depends on which rack you rent. So if you rent, for example, so you need to rent a rack that in the topology shows a desktop or a laptop or something like that. So for example, if I go to rentals.ine.com, the CCNA CCNP rack, you cannot. There's no host or laptop in there that has Wireshark on it that you can use. But for example, I think on the security rack, if I look at that, security rack overview, okay, I need a picture of the topology. Where is that? Let's see here. Yeah, so we've got some hosts in here like PCA, Wi-Fi PC. I believe those have Wireshark built into them. You'd want to read through this rack rental guide a little bit. You can read the rack rental guide for free. You don't have to spend any time renting the rack and see if it actually says that, but I believe those do have Wireshark. So that's what you want to do. Look for a rack that has a host in it, and those hosts should have Wireshark. What else do we have? Do they still give you the CentOS box as your host desktop in the lab, the VLab, that is? Yes. So depending on which VLab you're dealing with, like the switching VLabs I've worked on, they did have hosts in there. And yes, that was using the Cent operating system, CentOS, as the host. Okay, how to export the lab with all the configs in order to load it in future sessions. We talked about that. I showed you in the Cisco modeling labs how to do that. And I showed you in... so in the Juniper VLabs, it's not like Cisco modeling labs where there's just like one quick button you could press that would download a YAML file and have everything there. Unfortunately, that did not exist. So with the Juniper VLabs, I had to create my own YAML file and put my own set commands in there, and then I could use that for Ansible. Or, you know, if you're not familiar with Ansible, I could just SSH into each device one at a time and copy the configs and put them into a text editor and then paste them on later on. But there's no automated way to do it like Cisco has. Do I have demonstrations on IPsec, SSL VPNs, and Open VPNs? I personally do not, but we have a lot of videos by some really good instructors that show how to do that. Can we do DM VPNs? How about installing certs for the routers? So yes and yes. You can absolutely configure DM VPN on these. I don't know about, let's see, DM VPN is a Cisco thing. So in Cisco modeling labs, absolutely, you could configure DM VPN. As far as PKI and certs are concerned, once again, because the Cisco modeling labs in the DevNet sandbox don't give you access to the outside world, you're not going to have access to like a real certification authority, right? But you can configure one of your routers as a trusted certification authority, and that router can then hand off certs to other routers and switches in your topology that are asking for it. So you can absolutely do that. Now we talked about that. Okay, looks like all these have been answered already. All right, I think it looks like all the questions have been answered. Let me just check the chat real quick and see if there's anything in there that I missed. Does iOS XE and XR work well on Cisco modeling labs? Yes. So absolutely. I haven't played around with iOS XR very much and I know it's there. I know in the add nodes, they have nodes that have iOS XR, and they absolutely have CSRV 1000s or 10,000s there, which have iOS XE on them, and that works just fine. So you can absolutely use that. All right, woo, okay. We have talked about a lot of stuff, and I think we've covered everything. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I know there's other YouTube videos out there that also talk about how to use Cisco Modeling Labs for free, but hopefully you learned a few things from me that are not on those videos. And yeah, that's it. So thank you everybody for joining me today, and it was a great session.